Yeah, folks, it's time once again to rate some Marvel Snap cards. Are these going to be busted? Are they going to be awful? What is this new mechanic and keyword zombie horde all about? Will it be powerful? We're going to talk about all of that and more because we did finally get the official reveal video for this month's cards, which means we can take a look, discuss them, and lock in our predictions for just how good we think these are all going to be. That said, we'll go ahead and kick things off here with the new Season Pass card, Zombie Scarlet Witch. And she is a 3/2 that reads, after you play a card here, Horde +2. And you can read the text here for Horde, which reads, give power to your zombie horde. If you don't have one, create one at another location first. So that will still then gain the +2 power that the keyword indicates on any given card. So basically, anytime you see horde plus number, that's going to be worth that amount of power. It's just going to be dumped into a zombie horde at a separate location. The location does seem randomly chosen, just not at the same location as the card that creates the horde after that. I think, you can put a new horde card next to the zombie horde. It's not going to make a new one in another location. Just going to keep using that same one you made first. But what that means with Zombie Scarlet Witch here specifically is that, man, this has some really high potential scaling. This is basically like an Angela, where when you play stuff on top of her, you're going to get more and more points. But instead of pushing it into the Angela, it's just going to push it into the Horde, and you're getting +2 per play instead of only +1, which I think some older versions of Angela used to be +2. That card got changed so many times, I've kind of lost track, to be honest. But it was a powerhouse in its era, playing things like Kitty Pryde on top of it, turn after turn after turn, playing like move cards. You can play a Jeff and then move it out of the way, play another card behind it. We've also got Elsa that can play really nicely with that synergy. And I could see a definite resurgence of that style of deck, that kind of tempo, Angela, Elsa, Kitty deck, but now utilizing Zombie Scarlet Witch, because that is a lot of potential scaling every single turn. I think it's very possible to get like 4 points per turn starting from turn 4 onward, which means, you got 4, 8, 12 points on top of your Zombie Scarlet Witch potentially over those final few turns. Theoretically, even more is possible, but I think a range of 6 to 10 is very reasonable very often for this card, which means, you're kind of looking at a 3-8 or a 3-12, 3-14, 16 sometimes, depending on just how far it goes. We're also going to see some other kind of horde synergies as well. But ultimately, this is just a really nice power scaler, and I don't think 3 is too much for that to happen. Like, yeah, 2 is great with Angela, but 3 is still going to be fast enough, I think, in many cases, where you're going to line up some cool turns like Zombie Scarlet Witch on 3, Elsa, Kitty Pryde on 4, like, boom, just go, right? You're just going to start getting tons of points every single turn off that Zombie Scarlet Witch. Not to mention, you could have an Angela down first, I guess, too. Angela, Scarlet Witch, Elsa, Kitty, and it's just like, boom, that's going to be a ton of points every single time you cycle that Kitty. So I do like this. Now, keep in mind, with the Zombie Horde specifically, the more you commit to the Horde, the more susceptible it becomes to stuff like Shang-Chi or Shadow King, where you're kind of putting all of your points in the Horde. But, it doesn't have to be a Horde deck. This Zombie Scarlet Witch, I don't think it is a Horde deck. I think, this is, just a tempo deck, like we said. It's not about zombie horde stuff. There are going to be some other cards that might also like Zombie Scarlet Witch in a more horde-focused deck, but I think this exists beyond that as just a really good tempo card. Now, you do need a deck that's, probably going to have ways to do this multiple times. You may not want to just play this and play 3 cards behind it. It's not bad. You'd get a +6 out of your Zombie Scarlet Witch, or a total of 8 power. That's not bad for a 3-drop by any means, but I think really trying to magnify those results and cheat a few extra hits out of it's really the way to go for this one. So I do think it's good enough, though, to bring that deck back and actually make it pretty good. So to me, in other words, this looks rather strong. So next up here, we've got Headpool. This is the premium season pass. I can't remember the names of these, but the like $20 version of the season pass, which I think this will also probably be available in series 5 packs as well. I think that's what they did last month, so I'm assuming. Headpool here is a 1/1, and it reads, when this is destroyed, return it to your hand, then give all cards in your hand +1 power, which this is potentially a really powerful repeatable hand buff style card, which we've seen Viv Vision do that already. Turn after turn she can hand buff your hand. Viv did get a buff though because she wasn't strong enough, but I don't really think that was a problem with her effect. Like when it hits, Viv is nuts. I've had many games where if Viv hits 2 or 3 times, your numbers just start to snowball like crazy. You know, it can be worth an easy +6 or more very, very quickly with Viv Vision, and sometimes on key targets too that really benefit from those buffs. I actually think in many ways Headpool will be a more reliable way to buff your hand in a destroy deck. You know, play this down on 1, you carnage. Also keep in mind the Headpool is getting the buffs as well because it returns it first, then gives that +1 power. So if you're playing him turn after turn, you know, you're going to get up to like a 1/4 Headpool at some point. You're going to have like a Venom that's a 3/6 or something already at that stage. You know, Venom's going to eat the Headpool stats. It's just kind of stacking up turn after turn, adding up to a lot of little incremental value. Now, the question, I guess, is that better than going all in on a crazy big Deadpool instead of a Headpool, where, you know, Deadpool eventually starts scaling with that doubling? You know, going from 4 to 8 is a lot of points. Going from 8 to 16, crazy number of points. Headpool will never be able to keep up at that top end. It's more of kind of a consistent baseline power output as opposed to those crazy spikes. Sometimes those crazy spikes can be even more powerful to fuel something like Venom as well, as opposed to these smaller numbers. Typically smaller, wider buff numbers like this play better into things that somehow utilize those stats. So can you fuse a deck that has buff cards like, you know, Sebastian Shaw or whatever with the destroy deck and make those two things work together? Because that basically gives this extra scaling, extra high-end output that makes it more competitive, I think. It's going to be a tough solve. Like, I don't know if this is good enough in a destroy deck. Like, just, you know, it might be worth 6, 7, 8 power over the course of the game, which isn't bad by any means, but it's also just a slot in your deck. And destroy decks can be a pretty tight fit sometimes to get all of that going. So it's just a question like, man, if I'm paying 1 mana every time I want to do this, 1 energy, excuse me, God, Hearthstone on the brain. I'm paying 1 energy every time I want to do this. Am I getting enough of a return? Is it really giving me that win condition that something like Deadpool would instead? Like, technically, yeah, you could do both. And, you know, like, technically, this could buff your Deadpool, getting it a little extra juice along the way. But again, it's just a fit question. Like, does that all fuse together, or does this not find a spot because the deck is already so refined? I'm a little torn, honestly. I think it's going to be hard to build a deck that merges buff stuff like Sebastian Shaw or Brood or whatever, those classic examples, with Headpool. I don't think that's really going to work. It's just too many moving pieces. I think the deck will feel too split in half or whatever, and sometimes you'll miss what you need and it'll be hard to consistently destroy your Headpool. I do think probably, though, there could be some destroy deck variants that just sort of squeeze this in, pull out, you know, whatever random thing. I don't even know, like pull out a Wolverine or something, right? Toss in a Headpool, and maybe that's viable. I just don't know if it's going to be way better necessarily. It's probably just going to feel similarly viable to other options. So in other words, I think a good card, a viable card, it does ultimately put out a lot of numbers, but it also does demand upkeep, and it does demand, you know, energy expense every time. So it's not like you're just getting, you know, 1 energy and getting a buff 3 or 4 times. To get a buff 3 or 4 times, you're gonna have to spend 3 or 4 energy to keep replaying this thing, in essence. So you know, it's just work put into this, in essence, and I think that could be a little bit of a limiter that pulls the ceiling down on this just a hair more than people might expect. Next up here we have Colonel America. It is not Captain America. This will not work with the shield based on the wording of Sam Wilson's shield. He is a 3/3 with ongoing. Your other cards here have +1 power for each turn that you've discarded a card. So this is a discard enabler here, a discard power scaler here, where if you've discarded a card on 5 other turns, like assuming you play this on turn 3, if you've managed to discard a card on 5 other turns, this gives +5 power to all the other cards at Colonel America's location, which is obviously insane. That would make this a 318 in total output. He's a 3/3 and he's buffing for +15 at his location. Like, that's crazy efficient. Now, you know, it's not that likely that you're going to be discarding a card every single turn. Sometimes it'd be hard to build a deck that even wants to do that. But I don't think it's crazy at all to say 3 or 4 turns in a normal discard deck. I assume that's kind of your expected value, is discarding something on 3 or 4 turns, which that's still a pretty great rate of return already. If this is giving +3 to other cards, and you manage to fill out the location, which in a discard deck with like Swarm in particular, it's probably not hard to fill this out. It could just be like, I'm always going to play Colonel America and 3 Swarms or whatever. And if they're each getting +3, right, that makes him 3 + 9. That is a 12 power output card. Add in 9 more power, and Swarms, you're talking about a 21 power location with only 3 discards. Like, that's really competitive already, right? A 3/12 is, again, a really efficient for a 3-drop. So even if you only get 2 turns somehow, I don't think this is a bad card by any means, because that'd be another +6. That's putting him at 3/9. That's pretty above rate still for a 3-drop. So I do think this is a card that has the numbers to make a fit in a discard deck. It's just going to be the discard deck that has room for this and that can play enough stuff that it's going to want to do that. You know, if your discard deck's just all about Dakin and like Dracula or something, right, and you just expect to win with 1 card in a given location, you know, this might not make sense, right? And sometimes like Bullseye Swarms, like you want those Swarms in hand for, you know, maybe a Morbius or a Collector or whatever. Again, might not make sense. So you might have to shift the focus a little bit on this. And will it eclipse a normal discard package? I don't know. That's always hard to say, but I do think the numbers on this are really good, and I think you could still see some builds built around this for sure. There are also technically some ongoing synergies here, although we don't usually see that shining too much with you know, a discard build. So I do think this has the numbers though to carve out its own little niche version of discard. Even if it's not the best, I bet it could still look pretty darn competitive. So next up here is Zombie Mr. Fantastic. This is another one of our Horde cards. This time around, he is a 2/2. Is this our 3rd Mr. Fantastic, by the way? On reveal, Horde +2. So once again, you'll get that 2 power Horde if this is your first Horde card, as it often could be on a 2-drop, or you'll add 2 power to your Horde. But then also activate, give 4 of your created cards +1 power. So the Horde, of course, will be a created card. You know, Squirrels could also be a created card. You know, the Victoria Hand package has a lot of created cards. Importantly, this is not demanding they were created in hand like Victoria Hands. It has even more utility, but of course also could just fit nicely in a Victoria Hand deck that's already looking to create a bunch of cards. There are also some activate synergies here as well, right? Like technically this could go with Jocasta as another way to get some extra power out of this. So, you know, you've got like Horde stuff, you've got activate stuff, you've got created card stuff. You kind of have 3 routes already to potentially play this card, which is kind of cool. That definitely increases the likelihood, I think, that it's competitive. But just from a power output standpoint as well, right? It's not bad, right? It's a 2/4 to base because you're getting a 2/2 and a 2 power zombie Horde, and it's kind of spread, which is cool. But then the activate gives you potentially another +4, which pushes this up to you know, a 2/8, which again is really nice and above rate for a 2-drop. You know, I will say it can split 3 ways, but it is also limited by the fact that you have to have created cards, so that will potentially narrow the field of play for this a little bit. So it's kind of funny, like, can you build a Horde deck that has enough created cards to support it? Yeah, maybe, right? You can definitely build a created card deck. Like that's just gonna work. But then also, can you build an activate deck with enough created cards to make this good? I don't know. I think you definitely want to have 4 as often as you can. But you know, it's definitely not impossible to squeeze all those things together. So, you know, this one's it's kind of weird, right? It's got a lot of possible homes, but I also think you're gonna have to force it in sometimes, that created card stuff, and that could be a limiter. So then it's just a question: is like 2/8 competitive enough compared to the other things you could do in a similar slot? Like if you're running a created card deck, would Collector be a better 2-drop that gives you that bigger potential to scale? Yeah, maybe, right? It just depends a little bit on the list. So again, I think this is solid, and I could see this squeezing into some decks as a competitive card, but it's not one that jumps out at me. It's like, hey, I have to build a deck around this. The numbers are so insane that it's like this is going to be a key build around or anything like that. It just seems like another serviceable piece of a given puzzle, maybe even a couple puzzles potentially. All right, so moving on here to Zombie Captain Marvel. This is a 4/4 with activate. Destroy your other cards here to get +3 power for each, and then move to a location that you're losing. So number one, right, that is the potential to just gain +9 power on a 4/4. That effectively makes this a 4/13, which is really big. That is nicely sized for a 4-drop for sure. You know, in theory, sometimes destroying things has downside, and that's why this is getting a nice stat bonus. But if you play this in a deck with things that you want to destroy anyway, who cares, right? Like, I'm happy to destroy them. I'm going to double my Deadpool. I'm going to get a 7 power off Bucky Barnes, and I'm really happy that I've got an extra activator here. I will say the window on this one is a little tight since it's an activate card that costs 4. Sometimes those can feel really hard to play. Like, you kind of have to play it on that turn 4 or 5, which, you know, if you draw it too late, number one, that sucks. If you have other things you want to do in a given game state or deck, it can be sometimes hard. Like, it's like, oh man, I didn't hit this on 4, but I hit it on turn 5. Oh, but now I want to play like Venom on turn 5, and I can't really squeeze in the zombie Captain Marvel. Or if I'm using this as a Deadpool activator, I don't want to destroy Deadpool on turn 6. I want to destroy Deadpool on turn 5. So I have to play this on turn 4. I just know sometimes those more expensive activate cards can be a little clunky to work with. I find that a lot with stuff like Scarlet Spider, where it's like, oh, I want to play, you know, Galacti or Gwenpool, but then I don't have time for Scarlet Spider because I want to do something else on 5 or whatever. And I could see this landing in a similar sort of spot, but I also like that you can kind of load this up and preemptively set up for a destroy later. So, you know, you can zombie Captain Marvel and then Deadpool on turn 5 and still hit, you know, like it's cool that you can kind of weave this in preemptively, whereas a lot of destroy stuff has to happen after the fact, which can occasionally create some awkwardness too in its own right. But ultimately, you know, just high power output, destroy activations can also be really, really valuable. So I like those two things a lot. The move to a location you're losing aspect of this card is kind of intriguing, right? That can create some crazy flips, and you also can kind of manipulate that in some ways, right? Like try to lose a specific location and, you know, move her over and flip it, or put her there for some other various reason, or bail out of a given location or whatever because you're not worried about it, you know. There is some sneakiness there that's possible. I guess there's probably also technically some risk or downside where it's like the opponent's ahead by 20 in some spot and you're like, man, I really want to give that spot up. I just can't beat that. They're so far ahead. I'm done there. And then it's like, oh, well, zombie Captain Marvel moves in there and now you've wasted like 13 of your power in a spot you weren't planning to win because they have an Iron Man or something silly that you just can't go head to head with. So some also downside, maybe some upside. I'm actually kind of torn on whether I think that's a good thing or a bad thing. You know, it's not like end of game or end of turn where you can reliably say, I'm going to use this to flip or whatever. There's still going to be some timing issues on that as well. So I'm kind of split down the middle on this card because I think the potential's crazy high, like really high power output, destroy activations, all those are things you like. But there's also just some like consistency and timing stuff too that makes me nervous on this one. Not to mention some deck fit stuff as well, because I think this really wants to thrive in a destroy deck specifically. So high ceiling, but also maybe a low floor, if that makes sense. In other words, it can backfire or fail pretty hard, but could also really win games decisively as well. So next up is one of my favorite cards we've seen in a really, really long time. I love this one so much. This is Zombie Galacti. I just like that it's called Galacti #1. I've been calling it Galacti forever. I don't know. I'm sure I'm not the first, so I can't take any credit here, but I love that other people call it Zombie Galacti. This one's a 7/4 with a crazy effect. Start of game, choose 6 other cards in your deck. Now that's, you're not choosing, the card is choosing. It's random, but basically I think they should have used a word like mark 6 other cards in your deck or something. And then on reveal, transform those cards into copies of this, which at a baseline, man, that's going to be really hard to use, right? Like in theory, yes, you could run a bunch of like low powered stuff, a bunch of 1 power cards, right? And then you slam Zombie Galacti and they all turn into 4 power cards, right? And you're so excited. But keep in mind, it's transforming, so you can't do like, I'm going to do Cerebro 4 or whatever, because you might accidentally mark your Cerebro and then transform Cerebro into a Galacti, thereby overriding its ongoing effect. You know, same thing for Iron Man. You can't like squeeze an Iron Man and push it to 4. So at a baseline, this doesn't really work, right? You have to cheese the power on this in some way and increase the power value on the Zombie Galacti, so that you can just win on numbers. Also keep in mind, this is a 7-cost card, so you have to cheese it into play somehow as well. So that might require ramp, might require magic to go to turn 7, or the idea that I think solves both of these problems is actually Khonshu. We have Khonshu, where if you discard this card as your, you know, most high-cost card, say like a Lady Sif, or maybe, you know, a targeted blade or whatever, right? And then you start discarding Khonshu as well, then you can force Khonshu, in essence, if this is your only discard, the Zombie Galacti, to resummon you either an 8 or 12 power Zombie Galacti, 12 power in particular. That, number one, means you don't have to spend 7, so you don't have to do any weird, energy manipulations. And it's just a super quick, easy way to buff this up to 12 power. When that happens, it's if you've played, let's say, 3 or 4 of the other marked cards in your deck throughout that stage. Blade got marked, Lady Sif got marked, whatever. Proxima Midnight got marked or whatever, right? Then suddenly all of those cards are going to transform into 12 power Zombie Galacti, and your Blade's going to jump from 3 to 12. Proxima jumps from 7 to 12, whatever it is, right? Suddenly you're just your swarms, I guess. Good God, you could have swarms, I guess, that transform up to 12 power, and it's just this like crazy instant power dump that goes super hard. And obviously you just need 1 or 2 of those, or 2 of those really, to just like win locations outright in Marvel Snap. Not to mention Khonshu and Zombie Galacti are also both just going to be 12 themselves. Like, that's a 24 power play that could add, another, God knows, 27, 36, 45 power into play or whatever. I'm just making up numbers that are all multiples of 9 for some reason, but turning 3s to 12 is 9 extra every time. But it's just like a crazy amount of potential extra power when all of that lines up. So, the challenges there will basically just be lining that up, discarding your Galacti on time, discarding your Khonshu on time. But the crazy thing is, I think you can kind of almost just play a normal deck otherwise. Like, I'll just play a discard deck, and if Zombie Galacti doesn't line up, maybe I've got other things that line up instead. So I don't think you're like sacrificing a ton necessarily. It's not like ruining your cards in any other way. It's just kind of a dead card when it doesn't hit. And then when it does hit, things can go absolutely nuts, and it's just an instant game winner. You also, arguably have a little more data about that than your opponent, because I don't know. They might see which cards are marked. I don't know if they'll see what's been Galactied or not, but either way, I mean, you'll know exactly what you're working with, and that could be a snap advantage as well. Now, of course, you don't have to do Khonshu. I just think that's like the quickest, easiest way to solve this problem. But you could do ramp stuff with like Headpool and Galacta, and like, hey, just turning this to 6 power might still be worth it if you have a bunch of small stuff. Just run a bunch of little on reveal 1-drops or something that do disruptive or annoying things or create value or whatever, and then Galacti still just transforms all those into 6. That could be all that you need, frankly, to make this cool. So I think like Khonshu is my number one super obvious path here for this to be a powerful and interesting card, but there might be a few other ways to attack this problem as well. So I don't know. Either way, I think it's really cool, really fun, super interesting mechanic, and I think it does actually have a lot of potential with Khonshu specifically. All right, next up here is Zombie Giant Man, and this is really the only like horde synergy card. In other words, like all the other horde cards kind of just work on their own. They don't demand that you do more horde stuff. This is the only one that specifically requires horde to be good. As we can see, this is a 5/3 that reads on reveal horde +1. Then this gains power equal to your zombie horde, which I actually do think can get pretty big. We saw that zombie Scarlet Witch. We were talking about easily adding 8 or 10 power to the horde. We're going to see another card here shortly, the Hunger, which is a quick +3 on the horde for only 1 energy. I think getting an extra 10, 12, 15 power basically out of your horde is quite possible. And then, Zombie Giant Man might easily be a 5/13, a 5/15, a 5/20 or something if you do some crazy extra stuff with your zombie horde, which even in that Angela Scarlet Witch tempo package we talked about with Kitty Pryde, maybe this could still be a splash, just because man, you're getting your horde big enough, you think, in that deck specifically, that okay, sure, dude, yeah, I'll just run a 5/15 or whatever the deck, because it's just such a big giant monster. It's absolutely crazy when I'm still already developing a couple powerful locations or whatever. Honestly, might just be worth it. Turn 6 is like Zombie Giant Man plus Kitty Pryde and just go nuts. I could see that being a line. I think you could also put this in a more fully committed zombie horde deck where you're running all of these. I mean, we'll acknowledge Zombie Mr. Fantastic might be a hard fit there. What other created cards you kind of putting in the mix? But, just stacking up the zombie horde cards might be good. I don't know if Zombie Giant Man's enough of a win condition in and of himself. The deck would feel kind of disparate and split across that for now. I mean, another question we're gonna have to talk about eventually is like, are we ever gonna get horde cards again? Is this something that's gonna show up regularly, like every October? Do we just get a whole season of horde cards and these kind of stack up over time? Because that could definitely mean like Giant Man has a hard time right now, but maybe in a year or 2 years if we get more of these, like forget it, dude. That could be a crazy deck that comes together. This guy could be 25 power or something easily if we get more and more zombie horde stuff. So I don't know. I'm actually kind of already a little intrigued with that Scarlet Witch tempo deck. Really cool combination. You might be slamming like a 10, 12 power Kitty Pryde alongside a 15, 20 power zombie Giant Man alongside a board that's already pretty well developed. Thanks to, Elsas and Scarlets and Angelas and stuff. You could have 3 really strong locations quite easily off the back of all that. So I like it there as a splash, and then maybe a zombie horde deck comes together that's like fully in on zombie horde, but I'm a little bit less confident in that right now, just because I don't know if there's a critical mass of that, and I don't know if all the pieces necessarily fit well together, particularly because that Mr. Fantastic kind of feels like he's doing his own thing a little bit. So next up here is Zombie Power Man. This is a 2/4. It reads, end of turn, if you're winning here, discard the leftmost card from your hand, which, in theory, this would be a cool way to potentially support your Colonel America card, where it's like, hey, this is an easy way for me to discard every single turn. That's going to make Colonel America really, really big. So you like play this on 2, Colonel on 3, and you're like off to the races. There's maybe 5 discards guaranteed off Zombie Power Man as long as you keep committing to his location, which Colonel America would like help you do that, right? He'd keep like scaling up turn after turn with each additional discard, I guess, trying to get ahead a little bit of the opponent. In reality, I know how awkward it can feel trying to discard from the left most side. I've tried to do some Redshift decks that weren't specifically Agatha, and sometimes it's just weird. Like you have that thing you want in the leftmost side, and it's like, it's just like it doesn't line up all that well sometimes. Things tend to collect to the left because they're the things you're keeping, and the big things kind of naturally start moving to the left side of your hand. I guess I need that backwards for you guys. Whereas like rightmost is sometimes a little easier because if you discard a Swarm or a Scorn or whatever, they move to the right anyway. Apocalypse moves to the right, so it's a more natural process. Whereas things on the left are a little bit clunkier. So I don't know. There's also just the risk side of it where it's like you don't have control necessarily. Like it might be a bad thing and you might try to stop it and you can't. You have no way to remove power from a location, so you're kind of leaving it up to your opponent a little bit. So can you build a deck that's like dense enough in discard rewards that you don't mind that this is always going off? So you're running Scorn, X-23, Wolverine, you're running Swarms, of course. You just like Proximate Midnight. Like the whole deck is good if you discard it, minus maybe exactly Zombie Power Man and Colonel America. But even then, like, hey, what if Colonel America is the leftmost card in your hand? You're like, crap, I'm screwed a little bit, right? So I don't know. I do envision this one sometimes feeling awkward and punishing and hard to work with and just risky in a way. And I don't know that there's enough upside on it necessarily with maybe just like one thing or a deck that's really honed in on this. Sometimes it's hard to work with. So I think this one's actually going to be pretty hard to play. Next up is the Hunger. This is a 1-cost skill. Now, for the record, in the season blog, this was shown as a character, not a skill, but we're 99.9% sure this is actually supposed to be a skill. And it does read on reveal Horde +3. So this is kind of a 1/3 worst case at a baseline. Like technically, I think you could maybe run that in a skills-based deck. We had what's his name? That wizard guy, Nicholas something. I honestly have not seen that card since the day we played it. What is that guy's name, dude? You want to say Nicholas Strange, but that's not it. Nicholas Scratch, who's scaling off of skills. Like maybe this is just one more skill to run as a collectible skill. I certainly don't think that's a compelling reason to play this right now. More likely, of course, is that you're playing this in your Zombie Giant Man deck as another way to get, +3 to start, and then another +3 on your Zombie Giant Man, kind of making this worth +6 in total any games you play that Zombie Giant Man, which that is really efficient for a 1-drop. It's just a question is always like, will this make the cut in the deck? Because it's not just about does it fit, it's about what could fit better and what could complement a game plan better, and this might not always be the best way to complement that game plan, even if it's thematically connected, keyword connected. There could still be better 1-drops to run, there could still be better cards in general to run, because the output on this might just be too low for taking up that card in your deck. That opportunity cost essentially could be a little bit too much to overcome. So, you know, I think it's fine. Again, I think it'll be playable, but I do think decks will cut this. I think even zombie giant man decks might not find this one quite worth it. This feels like one of those cards you get out of a game mode or whatever. That's totally fine. You can run it. It's not going to hurt you. You're just not like compelled to really push for it. And then our final card here is Zombie Sentry, one last Horde card. This is a 3/4 with on reveal Horde +1 for each of your cards at the right location. So some more Sentry right location stuff here. So basically, you know, this could easily be a 3/8 if you play this when that right location is full. I think that's going to be unlikely. You know, that could definitely happen by turn 6. You don't normally want to fill out locations often until the final turn. So you know, leave yourself a little bit of flexibility. But playing this on turn 3, it's actually, you know, maybe if you're lining up the play and you hit exactly a 1 and a 2 drop, maybe you have +2 in the rightmost location and you get Horde, you know, +2 plus the 4 base power here. That's a 3/6. It's fine, but not the most exciting play on curve. You're not really that excited to play a 3/6. You know, like, yeah, the stats are split, which can be an upside. Kind of iffy, and that demands like a perfect on curve play. So you're probably lining this up instead on turn 5 or turn 6. And I'm just trying to imagine scenarios where that's something I'm really excited about. And nothing comes to mind. Even like a Silver Surfer deck where you're using this as a 3-drop. Even if you fill that right location, you play, you know, a Brood earlier or whatever, and you know, you play this plus a you know, Surfer on 6. It's like, okay, I'm getting a 3/8. It's fine, I guess, but it's still conditional, and it still kind of guides your hand a little bit too much, and it doesn't feel that much better than other 3-drops and other things to do. So I don't really see this being worth it in that case. I think, you know, pretty bad on curve, not a compelling thing that you really want to play later because the numbers just don't get that big. I just play a Sage or something if I'm trying to get power out of a filled location. You know, Sage might just be way better for a 3-drop that could spike, you know, as a turn 6 kind of play. So I just don't know when I'm playing this or why, or why it feels especially good compared to anything else. I think this is probably the weakest card in this entire video. And again, feels like one of those kind of throwaway game mode cards, but actually even worse than our previous one. I just don't think the numbers get there. All right, so all that said, let's go ahead and rate each of these cards from 1 to 4 stars, starting with the best and going to the worst. Zombie Scarlet Witch is a 4-star card. Zombie Galacti is a 4-star card, specifically because of that Khonshu deck. I think that has a lot of potential. Colonel America is a 4-star card. Headpool is a 3-star card. Zombie Giant Man is a 3-star card. Zombie Captain Marvel is a 3-star card. Zombie Mr. Fantastic is a 2-star card. The Hunger is a 2-star card. Zombie Power Man is a 1-star card. Zombie Sentry is a 1-star card. And yeah, there you go. I gotta say, that's Hearthstone card. I gotta say, this is probably my lowest rated season in a while. I almost never give out 1 stars. I don't even really give out that many 2 stars usually, but I think some of this is going to land with a bit of a thud. I don't know if it's going to really be that good. Some of these are really risky. Like Zombie Captain Marvel has a high, like I said, high ceiling, but super risky sometimes, hard to work with sometimes. Mr. Fantastic, it's just hard to find a home perhaps. Even Headpool, like one of the more promising cards, I still think is going to have a hard time competing with regular destroy decks. I do think Zombie Scarlet Witch looks very strong. This feels like a standout to me. This is just scaling really, really effectively. That seems good. Galacti, I think, will actually have one standout deck that's very powerful because of Khonshu. That just seems like a really, really good interaction that works so well with stuff like Lady Sif specifically. So that one's got a lot of potential. Pretty narrow, but potential. It's Giant Man. I think that could be a good splash, but just a lot here that's hard to work with. Now, I do like that only one of these like Horde cards is actually parasitic, but I am just curious about what Horde looks like in the future. We get more Horde cards. When, where, how do they fit in flavor wise? I certainly hope this is not just a one-time done thing. I also hope it's not going to take a year to get more into the next Halloween season, right? I hope they sprinkle some out here and there so that you get more kind of use of this keyword and potentially more support for Zombie Giant Man or whatever. But all in all, maybe not my not the strongest season that we've ever seen, I have to say. So curious if you guys agree, if you think the same sort of thing as I do here. Share all those thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks much always for watching, and I guess I will see you around.